The Arc of Appalachia has been saving wildlands in southern Ohio for the last 30 years, today preserving and stewarding over 12,000 acres of the Appalachian forest heartland of southern Ohio and West Virginia. As a secondary mission, the Arc also works to honor, in its works and teachings, the Eastern Forest's Native American legacies. As a part of this effort, the Ark purchased and reunited the fragments of Tremper Mound under one ownership and put together a 705-acre nature preserve north of Portsmouth, Ohio. Tremper Mound is one of the most significant earthworks ever built by the Hopewell culture, Native Americans who lived 2,000 years ago. In September 2024, Glenna Wallace, chief of the Eastern Shawnee, drove from Oklahoma to officiate the ceremony of the preserve's grand opening. The evening before the big day, Glenna shared her biography with the attending audience. We put together this video because we believe her story should be heard by a larger audience and become a timeless source of Glenna's inspiration and resilience.
Surely you've heard of the pyramids in Egypt. Surely you've heard of Ayers Rock or Mount Uluru in Australia. Or you've heard of the Colosseum in Rome. Or you've heard of the Acropolis in Greece. Or you've heard of Stonehenge in England. And I can go on and on and on. Machu Picchu in Peru. Taj Mahal in India. And in the United States, the Grand Canyon, Statue of Liberty. Those are World Heritage Sites. And now Ohio belongs to that list. There were 1,199 World Heritage Sites in the world when we went to Saudi Arabia. We were the 1,200th site established. It is the United States who started World Heritage. And yet the United States had only 24 sites out of 1,199 sites. And we became the 25th for the United States, and we became first for Ohio. I was asked how I felt, and I will be honest with you and say at first I was disappointed. And you would say, how in the world could you be disappointed about something like that? And that's because we went there, and because this is a project that I have worked on since 2007. You figure that up. 17 years of working to receive World Heritage for our ancestors. Why was I disappointed? Because we sat there because we'd never been to a place like that before, because we'd never listened to a nomination before, because we'd never heard discussion before. And there are 21 countries who have to agree that this is World Heritage quality. 21 countries. 2 nominations before ours. They spent 2.5 hours discussing it, questioning, and then the vote was no. 2 nominations later, it was our turn. And within 3 minutes, we were declared World Heritage. Was I disappointed? Yes, because I thought there's no discussion on this whatsoever. There's not been a single question asked. We can't respond. We can't tell you how proud we are. We can't tell you the work that we have done. We can't tell you the details that have have gone into this, and I was disappointed. But then I was asked to give a statement, and the statement was extremely difficult for me. I taught college for 38.5 years. I always taught the 1 hour, 15-minute lecture. Check your clocks. I got pretty good after 38.5 years of getting speeches 1 hour and 15 minutes. I've learned to shorten them a little bit because my people will walk out on me. But trying to think, I was allotted 2 minutes. 2 minutes to talk about the World Heritage and to talk about how I felt. If you Google it, you'll find it. It's there. But let me just read you the portion that I indicated. I said, I feel pure excitement and exhilaration. However, tears come to my eyes, and exhilaration is turned into reflection, knowing the world will now see and recognize the commitment, the spirituality, the imaginative artistry, and the knowledge of complex architecture to produce such magnificent earthworks. Our ancestors were not just geniuses, they were uncommon geniuses. Let me read you something else. This is a poem that was written by one of our tribal members. And he references me in here, and I would not say this, but he has written this. So you've heard how 21 nations unanimously, within 3 minutes, approved our nomination and made us World Heritage Sites. And yet this is a poem written by one of my tribal citizens. We left Ohio in 1832, not by choice, but death's cruel view. We walked the trail where sorrows lay. Over 1.6 million acres, all stripped away. Not chosen to leave, but forced to roam. By the time we arrived, no longer did we have a home. 68 souls were all that survived. The lucky ones, they said, they died. Incompetent and savage, that's what they called us then. But our stories told by women and men. The land we lost, the tears we shed. Yet here we stand, not buried, not dead. The Black Bob Band held their ground. 200,000 acres safe and sound, but treaties broke as lies were spun. They called us weak. They said we were done. Women and children, they called us frail. But we are here now. We will not fail. Glenna Wallace leads our tribe with pride. Athenian wisdom, strength by her side. Incompetent and savages, they called us then. But our stories told by our women and men. The land we lost, the tears we shed, yet here we stand, not buried, not dead. How could it be? They say we were weak, when the strong stand tall and the brave still speak. My daughter, my mother, our chief, they rise in this court where justice dies. If women and children were thought too small, how could we endure? How do we stand tall? Incompetent and savages, they called us then. but our stories told by our women and men. The land we lost, the tears we shed, yet here we stand, not buried, not dead. Thomas Captain's voice still rings. He was one of our chiefs for 25 years there in Oklahoma. So Thomas Captain's voice still rings. I refuse to live in past things. But from 68 souls to where we've grown, we fight for our land, our tribe, our home. 58 acres. That's all that's left. They said we were through, but the Shawnee heart still beats true. How in the world did I get to this place? How did this happen? None of this was planned. None of this was intended. That's not how I was going to live my life. So how did it happen? I was born in Ottawa County, Oklahoma. It is a place today where there are 9 federally recognized tribes in this one county. And the county is small, only about 30,000 people in the entire county. 9 federally recognized tribes, 7 of them removed from the Ohio River Valley. 7 of us removed from the Ohio River Valley. Now, before you feel guilty, don't feel guilty. You didn't do that. I didn't do that. You didn't live then. I didn't live then. But I live today, and you live today. And so what happens today, we are responsible for. We are responsible for. There are surveys that say that 40% of the people believe that Indians are dead. Those are current statistics. I believe it here in the state of Ohio. I believe it here in the state of Ohio. 40% believe we are dead. And the concept is still, too much so, incompetent and savages. Just recently, in June, here in Xenia, Ohio, an interpretive center built and opened, dedicated to the 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribes of today, all in Oklahoma. We were so proud. We rented a bus. We brought 60 people to be present for that opening in Xenia, Ohio. We were so proud. We had shirts made so that we were all dressed identically. So green shirts, on the front our seal, Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma. On the back, the date indicating where we were, the date of this celebration. And I was walking through the crowd, and there were 2 women sitting at the edge of a row. And the one woman stopped me and she said, "Where did you get that shirt?" Now, I'm guessing she thought that they were free shirts and they were somewhere and she had missed where they were being given out. And she wanted one of those shirts, which is a compliment, you know. I'm assuming, that was what I was assuming she was saying. And so I said, she said, "Where did you get those shirts? Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Glenna Wallace, and I'm an Eastern Shawnee tribal citizen from Oklahoma." She said, "Eastern Shawnee, does that mean you are an Indian?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am an Indian." She said, "Where did you get those shirts?" And I said, "We made them." And she said, "You are an Indian. Does that mean you are a Native American Indian?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." We are the Eastern Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma. And I thought I'd heard everything, but then she said, and you all know how to make shirts?
I hope you kicked
2 months ago. 2 months ago. You know, I can't make up stories like that.
You can't fix stupid.
2 months ago. So how did I end up? Not even, we were totally assimilated. My grandfather, my great grandfather, they truly believed the only way we could have a good life, the only way we could make it, is to be totally assimilated and totally as if we were totally white people. They had every good intention in the world. I have 3 children. I had every good intention in the world, but I can tell you sometimes there are days I wonder, what was I thinking when I taught them that, you know? They had every good intention in the world, and we became assimilated. Today, we do not have ceremonial rites. Today, we do not know our language. I have been taking Zoom classes for 3 years, and it is one of the most difficult languages I've ever encountered in my life. You know, to say good morning in English, 3 syllables, good morning. In Shawnee, Owasi Wapa Ni, 6, twice as many. If I say, how are you? How are you? 3 simple syllables, complete sentence. In Shawnee, Hako Wasi Lasi Mamo, 8 syllables, almost 3 times as many. And if they respond to me, it's the same thing. By that time, it's afternoon, and we've got to start all over again on something else. You know, it's complicated. It is difficult, but I work at it, and I make a point to be there and to take those lessons and to try to study. When I drive, I have my papers with me, except when Judy's with me, then we're talking. But if I'm by myself, I'm looking at that paper and I'm saying those words and trying to memorize. We don't have ceremonials. We don't know our language. I was not raised with any teaching whatsoever regarding tribes, being a tribal member myself. I knew I was Eastern Shawnee. That was the same thing as knowing I was a girl. That was the same thing as far as consequences of knowing I had brown hair. That was the same as knowing I had 4 siblings. There are 5 children. There was nothing extra attached to that. It was just simply a fact I was Eastern Shawnee. But there was no participation in anything, not a single thing that had to do with Native American, with being a tribe, with being a citizen of that tribe. We were assimilated, and we were successfully assimilated. We were as poor as we could be, but we were rich in family love and respect for each other, and that's far more important than having money. There are many things I love about my tribe, but there are also many things about Native Americans in general that break my heart. We have the highest suicide rate of any minority in the United States. We have the highest dropout rate of any minority in the United States. We have the lowest number of people going on to college of any minority. We have the highest dropout rate. We have the highest diabetic rate. I can go on and on. Things that I am not proud of and things that I want to work upon and find solutions. We have the highest alcoholism rate. And unfortunately, my father, who is not Native American, it comes from my mother, my father was an alcoholic. And unfortunately, he could not control his alcoholism at all. In Ottawa County, still to this day, for at least 30 years, we have been declared the most polluted site in the United States. We had lead and zinc mining there for years and years and years with no regulations. Those lead and zinc mines have left, but not the damage, not the things that they left. If you drive to our county and look from a distance, you would think that we have mountains. We don't, we have chat piles. The tailings, the ruins, the remains of that mining and those mines. And when it rains, what happens? It all comes down. It flows into our water sources. Our children test extremely high in all of those negative elements because of the pollution that we have there. And so my father, his father died when he was only 6 months old. My mother, her mother died when my mother was only 7 years of age. My mother is the Native American. What did I learn from my mother? Nothing about Native American, because what did she know? Her mother died when she was only 7 years of age. And so again, assimilation came natural to us, and that's what we were. Today, we struggle, we try. I don't say that we have lost our language. I don't say that we have lost our culture, but I do say it's been asleep for a long time. We're trying to wake it up. And so for me to have ever thought of being a chief, no way. No way. For me to even identify as being active in a tribe, no way. It just wasn't there. My father did recognize that because he worked in a mine and because of the fellow mine workers, that when they got off work on Friday, they had their paychecks in hand and they all went to the local tavern. And most of the money was left there at that local tavern. My father realized that with the friends, the work that he did, the place that he lived, the only way he was going to cure that alcoholism was to leave that area. And so he took his mining settlement, which would be similar to our taking out our 401k or our taking out our IRA, or if we have saved and have a CD or something, cashing in the CD. He took his settlement, his mining settlement. With that, he bought an old farm truck with a long flat bed, put up wood, covered it with a tarpaulin. I was the first RVer in the United States. We lived that way for 3 years. For 3 years, they were the best years of my life. You have the option of determining how you deal with whatever happens with you. You have a tremendous amount of power over that. And so for those 3 years, we either lived in the back of that truck or we were migrant workers going from crop to crop, field to field, county to county, state to state. In the wintertime, crops weren't prevalent, so we stopped. We lived in a town, we went to school, and then we started again in the spring when the crops were there again. If there happened to be an abandoned barn, we drove into that abandoned barn. It was wonderful if there were hay bales in there, because then we got a hay bale apiece and we could sleep on a hay bale. I became wonderful at being able to stretch on know how to curve and sleep on a hay bale. I can still do it today. I can remember being at one farm where we were picking green beans. They were pole beans, and so they grew up high. My father and I always picked that complete row together. He stood, he picked the top part. I was on my knees, bent, I picked the bottom part. I should have been smart enough to save those jeans and those knees that were all torn, and I could sell them for $100 a pair today. My mom and dad, though, even though neither one finished an education, my father went to the 8th grade, my mother went to the 10th grade. But they had common sense, and they knew how to motivate us. And as children, we were taught you have a responsibility to your family. You are here and you have to help make the living that we are making for us to live here. But we will give you your quota. We will give you what you need to do this day. And you must reach that. But if you go beyond that, you get to keep it. I had to be the greediest little girl in the world. If I was to pick 50 quarts of strawberries for the family, I got those 50 picked, but I got 25 more picked because that 25 was for me. And that established a work ethic in me. It established a daily routine of set a goal today. Know what it is you need to accomplish. And then work at not only accomplishing that, but go beyond that. So I became what is known today as an overachiever. I still do that today. And I'll be 86 years old in November. When I leave the house, I have my list. I must get these things done today. I must get these, and I cannot leave that work until I get this done. And then here's the other, if I can get that, that will be even better. But I must get this done. And so I have a work ethic. I would not have had that had I not been in Oregon, California, Washington, and been told every single day, this is your responsibility to family. So responsibility to family, responsibility to community comes natural to me. It's just something I grew up with. I was 9 years of age when we left Oklahoma. I was 12 when I came back. We came back because my father, unfortunately, was ill, and he had tuberculosis of the spine. He was drafted, even though he was married and had 5 children, in World War II. That's how desperate the United States needed military people to fight. And he was drafted and was served in the war. So fortunately, he could go to a veterans hospital. We came back to Ottawa County. Dad went to Muskogee, Oklahoma, 80, 90 miles from us. He had surgery. The surgery had never been performed before. They took out the bone from the knee down in his left leg. They removed his spinal column. They put that bone in his back, and it became his backbone. They took a strip of his flesh down on his leg, hiked his leg up in the air, and he had to stay there forever for that flesh to then grow at that back. They told him he would never walk again. He would never work again. He wasn't able to work again, but he was able to walk. And he lived to be 70 some years of age. So it was successful. But I will never forget that that was a situation that influenced me, because after he had the surgery, after we knew he was going to live, Mother got a neighbor, drove us down to Muskogee to see our father. They brought him out. We were there 2 hours, and he was never able to speak a word to us because he cried the entire time. I've often thought about how he had to feel how disappointed he had to feel in himself, how much he felt he had left and let down his family, that he didn't have self-worth because he wasn't going to be able to take care of us. And even though I was 12 years of age, I remember my thoughts quite distinctly. I looked around at my mother and looked around at my brothers and sisters, and I knew immediately here was this little girl who for 3 years had become the most independent little girl, who was so happy. I lived the life of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. I went wherever I wanted to. I did whatever I wanted to. The money I took to buy food that my family never had. It was wonderful having, today we have quarts or we have pints of ice cream, but we had bricks then. And they were the size, they were the length of a long brick. And I could buy a brick for my family, and we could take those strawberries and put on top of that, and that was better than any food there was in the world. But I stood there at the age of 12 and knew my independence was over. We lived in the country. We didn't have a vehicle. My mother had gone to the 10th grade. She didn't have any skill, any training. And I knew we were going on welfare. That was not something I wanted. That was not something I was proud of. And at that moment, a word became extremely important to me. Actually, 2 words became extremely important to me. And that word was options. My mother had no options. She didn't have a vehicle. She didn't have education. She didn't have training. We didn't find any notices that said we want a bean picker, or we want a strawberry picker, or we want a cabbage cutter, or anything. And I said, I want options. And the only way I knew to have options was education. So education became extremely important to me at the age of 12. There was never a single female in either my father's side or my mother's side who had even graduated from high school. And I said, I will graduate from high school. And I will go to college some way, somehow. I met a wonderful man. I married while I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school. We got married. I graduated from high school in 55. No, we married in 55. I graduated in 56. We had our first child in 57. But we had our second child in 58. And then we had our third child in 61. And so I thought, how am I going to get an education? But my husband understood my need for an education. He knew it had nothing to do with him. He knew it had nothing to do with our marriage. It had to do with seeing my mother, seeing my father, and I had this need of I had to have an education. And he was totally supportive. And so with 3 small children, my mother and father were retired. And the community college where I chose to attend went right by their house. So I was able to take my 3 children, drop them off in time for me to take a 9 o'clock class, go to college from 9 to 12, come back and pick up the children so they were not away from me that much. They were home every night. And I was able to do that and finish community college. We were able to pay for that. But then we didn't have any money because where we lived, we didn't have any 4-year schools in the area whatsoever. I could choose to drive to Springfield, Missouri, which was 90 miles away. I could choose to drive to Fayetteville, Arkansas, which was 60 miles away. I could choose to drive to Pittsburgh, Kansas, which was 55 miles away. I chose the 55 miles based upon that and nothing else. And we took out student loans. And so I was able to go. I had to have classes at 7:30 in the morning. So drive those 55 miles, take my children, have them fed, clothed, leave them at mom and dad's, and be 55 miles up the road by 7:30 in the morning. I couldn't do it today. I wouldn't even think of doing it today. But I was young enough, I can do this, you know. So Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, kick yourself in gear and go. And so I finished my bachelor's degree. Fortunately, at the time I was going to college, remember how far back that was? 85% of the students were males. 15% were females. Females never received a scholarship. It automatically went to males. They didn't even have a form to get a scholarship for females. But I had teachers who came to me and said, we have this particular program and we have some scholarships. I will nominate you if you will do this. And I jumped for joy. So I was able to do my master's immediately in 1 year. And when I finished, while I was in that 4-year school, the community where I live had voted upon having a community college. We had a military basis there, and that military basis closed. And therefore, if you developed education, that educational group could get that land free. We didn't even have that legislation. My tribe is in Oklahoma, but we are right on the Oklahoma-Missouri line. I live 2 miles from my tribe's headquarters, but I'm on the Missouri side. And so they had voted and established a community college district. I voted in that election, voted for it, never thinking that it would ever affect me whatsoever. But then they contacted me knowing that I was graduating, and they asked me to come and teach there at that community college. I was at that community college for 38.5 years. It was not a prestigious place, and yet it was the most progressive place that I have ever been. They had established, there are 114 counties in the state of Missouri. Our community college district was for only 2 counties. One of those counties was the second poorest county in the state of Missouri. We didn't have money for anything. We had low wages, but we taught because we knew our students in that area, they needed to have confidence in themselves. They needed a place to go to college. We were there, and we were determined to make them successful. They were not going to drop out. Every one of us as faculty members, we tutored, we brought them to our homes, we just basically lived with them, and the success rate was enormous. We tried things that we would never think of trying, and so here is this small, poor community college coming up with, hey, we don't even have a GED program. There's no way if a student drops out of high school, there's no way they can get a diploma. So we initiated a GED program. Guess who sponsored that GED program? Yes. Again, we were successful and gave students and adults an avenue of how to change and better their lives. We realized that we were in an area that we did not have minorities. And so we initiated student exchange programs, not only with just minorities, but with foreign countries. So we had groups of Russians come in. We had groups from other countries come in. We initiated at the same time, or a couple of years later, a faculty exchange program, so that we were not travelers. We didn't have experience, but with the faculty exchange program, we could exchange with a faculty, with a college in New Zealand, We could exchange with a college in England. They could come and teach at our college. We could go and teach at their college. We could exchange. We would live in their house. They would live in our house, wherever we were. I was able to go to England and teach. I was able to go to Australia and teach. That would never have happened had I gone to a distinguished, well-known place that didn't know we could set these goals and we could accomplish these goals, you see. Within 3 years, unfortunately, my department chair had a massive heart attack and died. Within 3 years of my beginning teaching, guess who they appointed as department chair? Simply because of the work ethic that I had, simply because of what I learned from picking strawberries, from picking green beans. In the place where we picked green beans, it was a farm, but it wasn't a green bean farm. It was a hog farm. And they had all these little pigsties. We all got our own individual pigsty. It was better than sleeping on a bale of hay. Had a roof over our heads. I can remember taking a broom, sweeping that dirt until it was caked and shine. I wanted the best pigsty of anybody there. And I had that best pigsty of anybody there. It was that work ethic that caused that. This was a brand new college. Within 4 or 5 years, they realized we have all these departments, but we don't have any divisions. We need to merge some of these things. And so they merged the Department of Communication that I was head of, and they merged it with Fine Arts and Design. And guess who they named as head of Fine Arts and Design? What does sleeping on a hay bale teach you about fine arts? But they also knew that I would work to try to bring fine arts to the area. And we brought some wonderful things, but the community was not fine arts oriented. So we didn't have the adults. We didn't have that many of the students. And so I realized they're not going to come to this fine arts, so we're going to take them to fine arts elsewhere. We devised a program. Twice a year, we had international travel. Guess who designed those programs? What did that mean for me? This poor kid who had no experience whatsoever, it meant I traveled to more than 70 countries. More than 70 countries. And I was picking the places that we went because of where is the famous museum? Where are the famous museums? Where are the famous cathedrals? And guess what I was picking? World Heritage Sites. Before I even knew what the word World Heritage Sites meant. It just meant I had heard of the Great Wall of China. Okay, let's go see it. And we did. It just meant I had heard of the Acropolis. Okay, let's go see it. And we did. I had been to 70 countries. So you were wondering, how does this all get around to World Heritage? Well, now you know. So I had been to more than 70 countries. And I had seen every one of those places. I had visited, I had stayed at those places that I mentioned earlier. During that time, I also became active in the Eastern Shawnee tribe. So for 18 years, while I was an instructor at Crowder College, and while I became administrator and ultimately academic dean, I was on the business committee of the Eastern Shawnee tribe. The business committee. And so, having traveled to 70 countries, and I had been in Australia for a year where I taught at 3 different institutions there, and I had just returned to the college, in the year 2000. And again, remember, I live 2 miles from my tribe, but I live in the state of Missouri. A gentleman came and knocked on my office door, and he was the CEO of Missouri Humanities. And he indicated, in 3 years, we're going to have a tremendous celebration in Missouri. And I want you to represent Missouri across the United States. What are you talking about? The Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery, the Lewis and Clark expedition in the year 2003 was going to celebrate its bicentennial. And this CEO of Missouri Humanities said, I believe Native Americans received the short stick in the Lewis and Clark and the results of it. And the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery expedition began in the state of Missouri. I don't intend for that to happen again. So I want a Native American who is active in a tribe, who lives in Missouri, to represent us, and a person who is not afraid of speaking, and a person that they can hear. Does that sound like anything to you? I want that person to represent us and talk about Native Americans. Now remember my background. I didn't know my tribal history. I was assimilated. I didn't know this, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. He said, what do you mean you can't do that? I've already talked to 10 people, and every one of them said, you're the perfect person to do this. What do you mean you can't do this? I said, I don't have a problem speaking. I don't have a problem of confessing things to people, of being open and honest. I don't have a problem talking. But when you talk, you have to have something to talk about. And I don't know the history of my tribe. And unfortunately, nobody else does either. I couldn't talk about my tribe for 5 minutes. And you want me to go everywhere and make a fool of myself? No. And he looked at me and he said, I've heard too many things. And he looked at the wall and he said, you have this degree, this degree, this degree. Are you trying to tell me you never had to write a research paper? Are you trying to tell me you didn't have to research things? And I said, well, yes, I did. I've been told that you have a work ethic and that you work. This is 2000. I'm preparing early for it. It doesn't happen until 2003. You have 3 years to research your tribe, and you have 3 years to know about things, and that's what you're going to do. And my college president was standing behind him. I'm going, he's going. I suddenly went from. So for 3 solid years, I researched the Eastern Shawnee tribe and all Shawnees. And if I'm researching Shawnees, guess what state I am spending a lot of time reading about, learning about? The state of Ohio. The state of Ohio. So from 2000 to 2003, I read every book I could get my hands upon, every magazine I could get my hands upon. I drove to Ohio. I went to places. I talked to people. I did everything I could to learn about the history. And then from 2003 to 2006, I still had my job, but particularly in summers, I had the entire summer off. I had weekends. I could drive. And I went to all of these various places and talked about the Lewis and Clark expedition and the role of Native Americans and the results of that. We're now 2006. I've been at Crowder College for 38.5 years. My brother was the chief of the tribe for the previous 8 years. He said, Glenna, I'm not going to run again. My wife doesn't like me being gone. I don't like the dissension that's in the tribe. I don't like the lack of respect that we oftentimes have. But he said, you could handle that. Why don't you run for chief? And I looked at him and I said, are you aware that in all of the history of all of the Shawnee tribes, there's never been a female chief? No one has ever been elected as a female who has run? And he said, you can do it. I was foolish enough to do it. I was elected chief of the Eastern Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma. First time for any female, not only in Ottawa County, of all of the tribes there, but through all of the Shawnee tribes. In 2007, while I was doing all of this research, there was a particular author that I enjoyed, and his name was John Sugden. John Sugden is an English author. He lives in England, has written biographies of many famous people, and he had written a biography of Tecumseh. And of course, Tecumseh is the most famous Native American and the most famous Shawnee that we have had. And John Sugden was going to be in Ohio, 2007, give a lecture at Ohio State University. I wanted to attend. And so I came to Ohio specifically to listen to John Sugden. I attended the lecture. He was marvelous. I was able to talk with him. What I did not know is that the next day, this is a speaker series, and they require the speaker who's doing that presentation to go to a place called Newark Earthwork Mounds. I had researched Ohio 3 solid years. I had talked about Ohio 3 solid years, 6 years, and never had I talked to a single person. Never did I read a single article. Never did I hear anything that anybody, even in Ohio, knew about Newark Earthwork Mounds. I was just told we were going to Newark. I believe what people tell me. I jumped on the bus and I went to Newark. Was I astonished when I got out of that bus and walked and looked and realized we were visiting a mound. In all of the research that I had done, I had gotten in touch with Native American values, Native American priorities, Native American beliefs. Mounds are sacred to us. Mounds, not all of them are burial mounds, but many are. But even if they are not burial mounds, they always represented the greatest spirituality. They always represented things that were important to us. So if we had had events somewhere, if we had lived somewhere, and we had to leave, remember, we lived in 26 different states that we can document. 26. And if we had to leave that area, and there was a place that we had spent special time at, we marked that with a mound. This is a sacred place. This is a special place. And we mark that with a mound. People came to know that's what the mounds represented. They were the highest part of our belief. Now, what words do you use to refer to mounds? We say they're made of dirt. Not to me. Dirt's what's under my fingernails. You say, well, they're made of soil. Not to me. Soil is what I use as potting soil to plant my flowers, to do things. Mounds are made of Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is sacred to us. Mother Earth means more to our culture than it does to most cultures. There is a spirituality. We lived, even as a child, even though I wasn't raised as Native American, when we went out to pick plants, when we gathered wild green onions, it was Glenna. There are 4 there. You pick 3 of them. You leave that 4th one so that it will be there for next year so that we will have that again. We were the first environmentalists, and it was Mother Earth. And when I arrived at Newark Earthwork Mounds and realized there's a golf course on top of Newark Earthwork Mounds. And Newark Earthwork Mounds are just not any mounds. If you've been there, they're miles in length. They're earthen walls that surround. And then there are the conical structures as well. But there's a diversity in mounds. And yet there was not a single glimpse or aspect of anyone realizing what those mounds meant. And it was total disrespect. There was a path, a gravel path, and they were having a golf tournament that day. They have, from the pictures that you saw, the photography, a viewing platform, a wooden platform, stairs, steps you walk up and look out, and you can see the Newark Earthwork Mounds. We couldn't even get to that platform because there were so many golfers, so many people there as spectators, people visiting. And when we tried to walk on that gravel path, it was also the only gravel path, and it's where the carts were driving, carrying the golfers, carrying the spectators, carrying the people. They were only doing their job, I realized that. But I wanted to see the Newark Earthwork Mounds. And so I persisted in trying to walk, and I would step back every time they come, but I evidently was not stepping back far enough, because they would say, step back, you're in the way, get out of here. And finally they shouted to us, you don't belong here. Ultimately, I made it to those steps, and I walked up, and I looked out. Now stop and think of the things that I've told you. I had seen hundreds of World Heritage sites. And when I looked out, I knew what I was seeing. I knew that what I was seeing was every bit as valuable, every bit as inspirational, every bit as sacred as the pyramids, as Mount Uluru, as the Colosseum, as any of the World Heritage sites. And I looked out, and the minute I saw that, I knew that I was seeing what should be a World Heritage site. And I started crying. And I came back down those steps crying. Now, there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. No two of them have identical beliefs. No two of us have identical constitutions. We are all separate. And so I'm not saying that everybody feels the way that I feel. I'm not saying that we all have the same beliefs or the same culture. I happen to be a Christian. I happen to attend church every week. I happen to pray to my Creator, but I also happen to pray to my Native American Creator. And I have no conflict between the Christian belief and between my Native American spirituality. I'm not saying everybody should be that way, but I'm saying in my part of the country, that's not unusual. And I walked down those steps, quoting a scripture from the Bible, saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I walked down those steps saying, I cannot be silent about this. I do not know what I can do. I do not know what one voice can do. But to live with myself, I have to speak out. This is a site that is owned by World Heritage, not by World Heritage, but by Ohio History Connection. They are supposed to be in charge, take care of all of our historical sites that we were forced to leave. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Why has no one done anything about it? I'm not anti-golf. I'm not anti-golf. I like golf. But I don't like golf on top of sacred mounds. And so my conversations at that time, it was called Ohio History Society. For a while, I didn't have much of a society with them. For a while, it wasn't the best relationship. Don't give me credit for World Heritage. You give credit to a man by the name of Bert Logan, who became the CEO of Ohio History Society. And Bert Logan knew nothing about Native American culture. Bert Logan graduated from West Point. Bert Logan was a military man. But because he knew nothing, he picked up books and read. And Bert Logan transformed that entire organization from the bottom to the top. John, you've been there. True or false? True or false?
I remember the old days, just like you.
You remember the old days. And so my involvement at first was not to be World Heritage. My involvement was to get that blankety blank golf course off of Newark earthwork mounds. And in 2007, that same year, I had already organized bus trips to come back to Ohio. And we brought 2 busloads, 100 of our tribal citizens, first time ever to be back to Ohio, the place that they felt rejected them. Now, you don't need to feel guilty. Maybe you don't know. When the vote was taken, Ohio had 2 senators. Both senators voted against the Indian Removal Act. Ohio had 13 representatives. 11 of 13 voted against the Indian Removal Act. So you are not the ones who were responsible. It was a gentleman by the name of Andrew Jackson. Since she has started traveling with me, she won't carry $20 bills because the picture is Andrew Jackson.
What year was that at?
The Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830. My tribe, we were the first to be forcibly removed from Ohio. 1832. We signed a treaty. We were on a reservation. We had been moved and told what to do, fought until we were placed on a reservation in 1817 here in Ohio near Wapakoneta. Two tribes together, Senecas and Shawnees. We were called the mixed band of Senecas and Shawnees. We were the first to be forced out of Ohio. They wanted us to go on watercraft. We refused. We said, no, we're afraid it will catch on fire. We'll all die. We're not so sure that you wouldn't set it on fire deliberately. We're not so sure that you wouldn't have blankets laced with something that would kill us. We will leave Ohio as we came to Ohio, on foot or on horseback. And that's how we did. How well organized was the United States? They put a limit on how much money they would spend on each of us. It was like a bounty on the head, $20 per person. That's the maximum you can spend to take them from Ohio to Indian Territory, 1832, which became in 1907 the state of Oklahoma. They ran out of money 100 miles down the road. And believe me, it's more than 100 miles from Ohio to Oklahoma. The Indians had to finance their own removal. Many, many died. We left in September. So we were traveling the months of September, October, November, December. What's the weather like? Oh, they were very concerned about us. We arrived in Indian Territory in Oklahoma, 1832. We were promised 60,000 acres between the two of us. So let's just say we split that evenly, so 30,000 apiece. We ended up, the government always keeps its promises. Always keeps its promises. We ended up with 58.19 acres. And it's in a floodplain. 58.19 acres. And it's in a floodplain. We got down to only, I've read different numbers from different sources. One says 69 people, one says 68 people, one says 63 people. Certainly not many, whichever number there that you take. We arrived in what would become Oklahoma, December. Our weather is very similar to you. What are you growing in December?
Icicles.
Icicles. What food is available? Do you plant in December? I don't think so. We basically starved to death. So do you think we were doing ceremonial rites? Do you think we were doing all of these cultural aspects, or were we just struggling to survive? And that's what happened. We struggled to survive. So very quickly, let me read you some dates and what has happened to my tribe. And so those dates are 1830, the Indian Removal Act was passed. 1831, we signed treaty guaranteeing us 60,000 acres. 1832, we left in September and walked the entire way. 1860s, Civil War. The United States more concerned about the Civil War than they were with Native Americans, so where was their attention? You know where it was. It was the Civil War. 1867, after the Civil War was over. Remember I said there are 7 of our tribes in Ottawa County that came and were removed from Ohio River Valley. We were the only ones who went directly to Indian Territory, which became Oklahoma. The others were removed later because we were the first. They were removed to Kansas. They stayed in Kansas the entire time until the end of the Civil War. 1867, remember we went there in 32, so 67, we're talking 35 years later. They moved all of the tribes, those 5 tribes, from Kansas to where? Our 60,000 acres. That's when we were 58 acres. An omnibus bill was passed, and that omnibus bill brought those tribes down, and at that time they separated the Shawnees and the Senecas, and we became the Eastern Shawnee, and they became the Seneca Cayuga. So that's when we became separate states. Oklahoma did not become a state until 1907, so we were still under the government from 1832 to 1907. We did not become a federally recognized tribe until 1939. We had our first constitution. We had our first federal recognition. We elected our first chief. We elected a business committee. We did not have a single building, a single place to meet, a single place to hold our records. So why did nobody in the Eastern Shawnee tribe know their history? We had nothing until the year 1977, which is 145 years later, with nothing. Barely able to live and to survive. 1977, we built our first building. We had a grant. They were going to build an economic building. There was not enough money. The contractor skipped town. We had an unfinished building. Stayed that way until 1984. In 1984, now between 1977 and 1984, we did build an administrative building, and we built a building that's called Title VI or AOA to feed our elders. So 2 buildings. In 1984, we opened a bingo hall. That changed our tribe. That bingo tribe, that bingo hall was successful. So 1984, we saved all of the profits from that. Now, my sister owned the concession stand there. I was teaching at college. It was open only Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday day. She didn't have enough money to buy a cash register. She didn't have money to do anything else. Hey, listen, people, I'm a mathematic genius up here because of figuring out if I pick 50 quarts for my parents and then I get 25 quarts at 5 cents a piece, how much have I made today? Listen, I figured that and knew it. I learned mathematics. I learned subtraction, addition, division, percentage. And so I said, I will run the first part. You don't have to have a cash register. I can figure it all in my head. And so I'll run the front part. You run the kitchen. And we did that for quite some time. We saved every penny we made from that bingo hall. And 3 years later, we're able to buy 112 acres that's not in a floodplain. That's what we did with our money. And then in we were that way until 2001. So we bought that land in 1987. It was not until 2001 that we were able to put a building on that land. And in 2003, that bingo hall had done so well, we built our first casino. In 2000, and I thought at that time, remember this day, Glenna. You've built a new building. You have a good business. You'll never experience this again in your life. 2012, 9 years later, we built an enormous casino because that casino was located on that 58 acres. We didn't have room for a hotel. We didn't have room for this. We didn't have room for that. So we built a place that's called Indigo Sky that we still have today. And that was in 2012. At that time, we had 6 buildings. Today, I said I became chief in 2006. Today, from that time, we have built 9 elders duplexes, 27 houses for our housing authority, 6 farms with 6 farm dwellings, 6 tiny homes for women who have violence committed against them and need temporary replacement. We've built 8 buildings. We have now 65 buildings since that time. We have been busy. But World Heritage became the primary emphasis in my life in 2007 because of our ancestors. That's what Ohio needs to concentrate upon today. So, I have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren. I have a great-grandchild that this was a couple of years ago, and he was only 2 years of age. And his mother was giving him a bath, as she does every night. And then they dry off, put his pajamas on, and he goes to bed. He's a very obedient child, very intelligent. And so his mother gave him a bath. He loves for the water to go out, and he stays in that bathtub stretched out until every drop of water is gone. Well, every drop of water was gone, but Beckett stayed in the bathtub. And Mother said, Beckett, let's get out. The water's gone. The bath is over. We need to wrap the towel around you. We need to dry you. We need to get your pajamas on, and it's bedtime. And this very obedient child in a loud voice said, no. And she was a little shocked, and so she repeated, Beckett, you've had your bath. All the water is gone. It's bedtime. We need to get you dried off, so come on, get out. Let's put this towel around you. Let's get your pajamas on, and let's go to bed. And again, he said, no. And she looked at him and, Beckett, what's the matter with you? You've had your bath. I've played with you. The water is all gone. We need to dry you off, put your pajamas on, and you go to bed. And for the 3rd time he said, and he's 2 years old, he said, no, I want to lie here and think about my life.
Oh my
That's typical things that come out of Beckett's mouth. But I want to lie here and think about my mouth. What you are doing here and what Nancy is doing with Ark of Appalachia is not the same thing that we did with World Heritage. And now we're beginning to deal with NAGPRA, an issue with Ohio History Connection. But it is something that we weren't responsible for what happened in 1830 or what happened in 1832 or what happened before. And it is with no malice But each of us, we have a responsibility about our lives. And we can choose whether we want to do something good to help our communities, to help our towns, to help ourselves, to help our fellow man. We can choose how we want to spend that life. And so I say to you, I don't regret all of the time that I have spent. I can't tell you the things about the mounds that this man can, John Hancock. That was not my role. My role in this has been as a speaker. And every time Bert Logan had a problem with his board of directors, he would say, Glenna, you've got to come here from Oklahoma and you've got to talk to this board of directors and tell them how important it is and how we can accomplish this. And so Glenna would drive up and would talk to the board of directors. Or Glenna would drive up and talk to this group or talk to that group. I was the voice. They did the work. It's easy for me to talk. Can you figure that out? You know? It's easy for me to talk. I don't have to write out a speech. I don't use notes. I have them because I wanted to read that poem to you. But each of us is responsible for how we are living our lives. And so I ask you, be active in Archibald Village. But our ancestors, are you aware that at one point Ohio had more than 10,000 mounds? And now we are under 1,000. Why did I do this? Because I said to myself, there were 40 to 45 tribes that lived here in Ohio. Every one of them has been forcibly removed. And when they were removed, the people who were the Native Americans, what happened to them? They were removed as well. And when I saw Newark earthwork mounds with the disregard of having a golf course on top of it, now there are a lot of things that I don't know, but when I realize that I'm doing something wrong, then I try to change. We tried to talk with Newark earthwork mounds, the mound builders, and visit with them, offer to buy it, offer to pay. Nothing. Court, court, court. So I think we had to go to court 4 times. And we won that only within the last 2 or 3 months. And so now, January 1, 2025, we take possession, meaning Ohio History Connection takes possession, and then with that golf course will be removed. I've been able to travel a great deal of my life, and it's been all by accident. I didn't plan any of that. I didn't earn any of that. It happened. But one of the places that I love most in the world to go to is here in the United States. And I have to go to DC frequently to plead the case of my tribe and other situations. And when I am there, I always try to go to a place called Arlington National Cemetery. It is a cemetery. It is a place of death. But I don't feel any sadness. I don't feel any sorrow. Instead, I stand there and I am impressed with the simplicity. I am impressed with the beauty. I am impressed with the history. I want to walk and look at as many stones as I can. I want to read the quotations of President Kennedy and others, and I come away feeling inspired. I come away honoring those who are there, and I come away wanting to be a better person. That's what I hope for all of the mounds that we have placed, these 8 ancestral mounds, and hopefully others. But that's what I hope for these mounds, that we are able to convey how important they are, how treasured they are, and that you will help in achieving that. Thank you so much.